was premier in China, what were the ramifications of the French Revolution, which had taken place 200 years beforehand, and he said it was still too soon to tell. I think anybody who reaches very definitive conclusions about COVID-19 and its impact on anything at this moment in time is probably a little bit too soon to tell exactly whether things are permanent or not. But I think there are some definite emerging themes, and some of them are very relevant to EastSide Partnership and its work. So I think people are much more appreciative of open and green space. You see that particularly with our hospitality sector members who are embracing the space outside their premises and have developed some fantastic spaces for people to, in spite of the weather in this part of the world, to enjoy the hospitality that they offer, but outside because of that, the fact that they are limited in terms of capacity indoors. Active travel and connectivity, and obviously EastSide Partnership in its role with Constwater Greenway is very much to the fore of all of that. But I think there is a desire amongst many people to, their state-sponsored daily exercise, to make that something that is a permanent feature in their life. I put flexible working because I think home working is something which the novelty is well and truly worn off on. Lumping homeschooling on top of home working is not working for a lot of people. But I do think that flexibility, and talking to the employers that we talk to, and we talk to lots, and all of them, I think, are, particularly those who are office-based, are going to make sure that part of their toolkit that they're offering employees from now on is a greater degree of flexibility about where they work and how they work. Some broader things for the city, clearly a need for more residential, more city centre living in Belfast. Part of the reason why those streets are empty is that there is no localised population in the city centre for those shops to serve. Those essential retailers are allowed to remain open to serve. So that's why even in Belfast, essential retailers, which in other towns are thriving and doing incredibly well, are closed in Belfast because there's no city centre population that in the same way that you would get in Manchester or Liverpool or Leeds or elsewhere. Empowering the city is something that we at Belfast Chamber are very interested in terms of making some of these other things happen that we're going to talk about in a second. Needs a much stronger, more powerful council to do that. I know we're graced by company. Other councillor here this evening, I'm sure he would very much like to have more powers at the disposal of the council to make things happen much more quickly. We at Belfast Chamber have been trying to bring all of our thoughts of the business community in the city together, and we published this document way back in June time, actually, but it stood us in good stead, and it's something that we will probably look at and review this year. But Building Belfast Back Better was something that we published in June with 15 ideas about how to rebuild the city, both in the short term and the long term. And at its core, it was a much more attractive, more recreational, more vibrant, more green, more experiential, and more empowered city. Now, some really good things are happening in Belfast. This is a snapshot of some of them, and Councillor Kyle will be familiar with many of them from a council perspective. So up in the top right-hand corner is Cathedral Gardens, so a temporary pop-up park there. That was a concrete jungle, formerly called Boy Park, looking really well, has been quoted in the Los Angeles Times as a great example of this type of work in cities. Bottom right is the Ormer Road, where there is a parklet sitting. These people are sitting in what was formerly car parking spaces. It's the only one of its kind. There are plans to have more across the city, but again, it's a really good example of how businesses are seizing the opportunities out of a very difficult set of circumstances to reimagine the space around them. On the left-hand side there's Morris Kincaid heading up the temporary cycle lane on Dublin Road. If you squint and look into the far distance, you'll see Sammy Douglas just way ahead of him there. If you just look at, but that's a temporary cycling lane that has been put in place. I think our view around this is that these are all very good and very welcome, but there is a need to make these investments proper investments to get really good high standard, whether it's cycle lanes or parks or parklets. And there are plans to do a lot more across the city on this, but I don't think that this should be the height of our ambitions. I think we should be looking at other cities, and if you go to places like Paris and San Francisco and lots of places around the world, they have really embraced this sort of agenda. And I think there are opportunities to, I should almost sort of set this up as a pop quiz here. Does anybody know where these cities are? Top right is Knockcastle Place in Belfast, although it doesn't look massively dissimilar to it. That's in Copenhagen. You know, how do we get much more sort of walking, cycling friendly spaces within cities. The bridge on the bottom right is in Bilbao in northern Spain. I think that's exactly the sort of bridges that we need more of, connecting the east of the city and the southeast of the city to the city centre. With a tendency that we build bridges, and as part of it, we tend to build bridges, I always think, that look like something that the army would put in place in a war zone. Attractive, iconic bridges like that, I think, are destinations in and of themselves, as well as nice places to cross over. Bottom left is one of my favorite places I've been to in the world, and I'm sure some people maybe have been to this place as well. This is Chicago, and that is downtown Chicago. Look, you can see the skyscrapers in the background. This is a massive place. It's only about a fraction of what is actually on this site. There's an ice rink and lots of other stuff in behind us, and climbing walls. And if you look at what's great about this, not only is just its location right in the heart of one of America's biggest cities, but look at the people who are there. They are young families, and it's one of the things that are absolutely, it's a demographic that is missing all too often from the centre of Belfast, both in terms of living, but just also visiting as well. And that's the sort of thing I think we need to attract people into Belfast. Yeah, sorry, thanks, Anne. And there's on the left-hand side is a High Line, which EastSide Partnership will be very familiar with. It was used as a case study for the Greenway. Super Killen Park in Copenhagen on the top right. Bottom right is O'Connell Street in Dublin. Used to be sort of 4 lanes of traffic one way, 4 lanes of traffic the other. Now it still has traffic going through it, but it's public transport, taxis, and it's very, very green and lots of places for people to meet. And the final thing I'll just say is that why this type of agenda is important to us in Belfast Chamber. We're not talking here about corporation tax or innovation policy. We're talking about quite sort of soft and aesthetic and environmental things. Belfast works and succeeds on the basis of people, our ability to attract and retain talent that work in the various companies that we have across our city, the ability to attract tourists to this part of the world, visitors to this part of the world. This is a sort of city that those people want to be in, they want to live in, they want to work in. So that's why this type of agenda, as well as all those other things that a business organization like ours would all normally focus on, is incredibly important, I think, to the future of Belfast. And even though we're in a very dark and difficult time, we've been through plenty of those down through the past, we need to seize the opportunity of this to rethink and reimagine large parts of the way we live and work and enjoy our city. So thanks, Anne, for the opportunity to share those thoughts. Looking forward to the rest of this evening.
Fantastic, and thanks for that sort of inspiration about what the possibilities might be. I'd like to introduce now Brendan Murta. I'm sure many of you know Brendan. He's a professor of urban planning at Queen's, and Brendan was sort of one of the people behind the idea of doing these webinars. Brendan's research is mostly around areas around the social enterprise sector. So Brendan, over to you.
Hi everyone, and thanks for the invitation. It wouldn't be a lecture if I couldn't use some slides here, so I hope you can see some of those. And I just want to make some pretty simple points about the economy, East Belfast, and in particular the social economy. And it is, like the mainstream economy, something that trades in goods and services, has businesses in it, but uses its profits for social purposes. It relies the same as private businesses do on finance, on skills, on intermediaries, on markets. And in EastSide, we have a really good example of that, which I'll come on to in a moment. But I wanted to start with the context here, which is a graph looking at the change in occupational class in Northern Ireland as a whole. And one of the things that we've seen, and when data comes out later next year, we'll see this accelerate. What we've seen is a massive increase in the number of people in the highest socioeconomic groups, and we've seen a substantial increase in the number of people in the lower socioeconomic groups and the squeezed middle, partly to do with public sector job cuts, deindustrialization affecting manufacturing in particular, security jobs going down and so on. But if you look at from the 21.72 to the 35, there's three things determine whether you will be mobile in Northern Ireland in those 20 years. Whether you have a degree, the qualifications that your father had or main parent, and whether you were male. Religion and other things that we used to obsess with have virtually nothing to do with social mobility. And that social mobility and economic restructuring that we saw after 1998, new jobs coming in, the growth economy accelerating, investment in things like informatics, finance, back office services, looking to the university and both universities for a new knowledge economy, but it was very, very spatially preferential. And that landscape we see around us. And I'm not one to knock this either. This is great to see these types of jobs, great to see the university, our own university, involved in the science park and cybersecurity, film and post-film production, tying into the new economy and giving us connectivity where we didn't have it before. And I'll come back to that point because I think Simon's point about connectivity was the right one. What we're facing here are two types of problems. One is a spatial mismatch. The jobs are now appearing on these new landscapes like Titanic Quarter, the city centre, University of Ulster's relocation to the Cathedral Quarter, the Innovation District, and that's good. But even if poor communities can get to them, they also face then a skills mismatch. They don't have the skills, often the basic literacy and numeracy to access the jobs that are there, which is why we need a different type of economy and a different type of enabling environment to support the type of projects you're frankly going to hear from Maeve and Sami an awful lot more about than academically. But it is worth reflecting on what that economy can do and how it can be managed. We were doing a bit of work recently and picked up on EastSide's submission to the Belfast Development Plan process. And it's quite telling in that plan that while we had all this narrative about growth and about investment and innovation and creative economies, that's great. It said, as EastSide pointed out, next to nothing about disadvantage and marginalisation. It mentioned disadvantage and inequality 12 times in a 300-page document, which is simply not enough. And they make the point, if it doesn't appear on our policy language, it doesn't appear as a political priority. If it's not in the narrative, it's not going to appear. And yet, if you go to other places, the Basque Country, small open regional economy, the same industrial history as us, shipbuilding, heavy engineering, a real mess in the 1980s, far more serious problems than we had with drugs and economics, and some senses had violence and so on. And it has now turned that around because it backs social enterprises and cooperatives. Mondragon Corporation is the 6th largest business in Spain. It has its own bank, its own university, its own spin-out companies. This Mondragon Team Academy is looking at where's the next generation of social enterprises going to go. So there's nothing, and sorry, when you look at other places like Canada or Korea, there's nothing to stop this working at scale. We don't have the enabling environment, we don't have the finance, we don't have the policy and legislative support to allow us to grow these, not in competition, not to edge out commerce or Titanic Quarter or privatization or inward investment, but to sit beside it and to become much more connected to it. So it's great that we have Titanic Quarter, but proposals for things like social enterprise zones that might give the like of EastSide a fighting chance in East Belfast, again, were debated, we talked about them, and they frankly never appeared. And here, these as you see, and you'll know better than me from EastSide, it's not Mondragon, but nor is it small scale. You've got a real asset base, a real collateral. You've got investment in places with the private sector wouldn't go and the public sector increasingly can't afford, putting in viable shopping centres, health services, providing employment and being really well connected or attempting to be really well connected into the growth economy that's happening around Titanic Quarter. No one is suggesting it's easy. Every asset used and every asset sweated, whether it's from George Best's house, which is a really interesting and useful attempt to protect and respect the heritage of East Belfast, but also to turn it and convert it into finance and money and jobs, investment and interest in the east of the city. All of those things need support. They don't just happen on their own. And examples like now that Maeve will talk about and EastSide and others are far too isolated, far too marginal, far too much struggling against some of the mainstream. Just to close, we have seen, and the Building Back Better, and it's great to see Simon talk about Building Back Better, and that is really positive for the city. And I think there is a collective agreement about what we need to do to build back better, particularly in places like Belfast. But if we've just invented this city, and it's interesting, rates of segregation between Catholics and Protestants in Belfast are down before where they were before the Troubles started. And the next census will show that probably the lowest in our history. But they're very much concentrated in the south and the east of the city. So at one stage, we've become more integrated, and more prosperous and more mixed as labour and housing markets have accelerated in the south of the city. And elsewhere, not that far away, including in East, but also in North and West, more interfacing, more resource competition, and even more violence. And we tend to almost segregate those areas off, police them, securitize them, just leave that to the police. They'll deal with that. As long as it doesn't come across to these other privileged parts of the city, that's not really going to be building back better. And we need a serious conversation about what wealth is and how it circulates around these economy. And some of the things, and it is a bit catchy and yet another phrase to learn, but community wealth does offer us not kicking out the economy and the economic success that we've had, but balancing it with other place-based approaches that speak to our assets and our resources, that capitalize on the talent and skills that we have, particularly in the east of the city, and makes the economy something that really responds to the needs and expectations and desires of people who live in these communities. Not the same thing as everyone else, decent jobs, good services, decent housing. And there's a lot of potential in this, because where we have backed those sorts of models, as we'll see in a moment, they have worked. Just very quickly to close, I think there is a real challenge for us, if we're talking about building back better, to put in place a proper policy infrastructure and an enabling environment, an ecosystem like they do in Canada, like they do in Emilia-Romagna in Italy, and like they do in places like South Korea, that will actually allow this economy to grow and not heroicize these very important isolated examples, but actually grow alternative forms of wealth building and economics. We need investment, and we've got some good social investment here, but we need proper balanced social investment, a much more serious investment in skills, which is a huge challenge to the community and voluntary sector, and much better legislation. We don't have social value acts. We don't have community asset transfer legislation, despite the fact that they were all proposed years and years ago. We seem to be going around the same circle. Not to give the advantage to social enterprises, but to buy from social enterprises the sorts of triple bottom line effects, if you like, the social, the economic, and the environmental returns that we frankly cannot get from the private economy, and increasingly are struggling to get from the public economy. They can live together in a proper wealth building model, and they can live together sustainably in any attempt to build back better after this COVID is over. Okay, thank you.
Brendan, thank you very much. In 4 slides, you communicated an awful lot of really important information in a very understandable way. So really thank you for that. And just to say to people, if there's some questions coming up on the chat, which is good. So so far you've heard 2 very stimulating speakers, so you may have questions you'd like to ask. I want to hear for 2 or 3 more people now before we open up for a bit of discussion. I'm delighted that Rachel McGuckin has been able to join us. Rachel works for Visit Belfast, and she's already started her screen sharing. So Rachel, I'm going to hand straight over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Anne, and thanks very much to all of you for inviting me along this evening. I think the background to me being here is very much that I sit on the Resilience and Sustainability Board with Michelle, and for my sins I've picked up the mantle in Visit Belfast around really driving the sustainability agenda, and I suppose really I wanted to talk to you today and this evening about what we've done, our journey, and it's a very early journey in that. And really to ask for your help and support, because we have an awful lot to do, an awful lot to change, and an awful lot to make better. And you'll see that obviously tourism has been a huge success story for the Belfast economy, and EastSide has played a huge role, and it's very much been an exemplar for a lot of the brilliant work in community tourism. But certainly in terms of whenever you see my plan, there are some gaps in it, and I think that's a real opportunity for us to work together going forward. I think you'll all be familiar with these slides and the growth of tourism. And I suppose from a Visit Belfast point of view, our objective was all about growth, and it was all about fast growth, more jobs, and it was all about visitor numbers and visitor spend. That was our only KPI that we had. And our challenge and pressure was there was huge infrastructure investment, huge capital investment in hotel infrastructure. People had opened up restaurants, and there was a huge growing industry relying on visitor numbers and visitor spend. And sustainability is nothing new in tourism. In fact, it's always been there. It's probably quite a mature trend. But we always, in truth, looking back, we always looked at it as the sustainability was something that really successful destinations got to whenever it was a problem. You know, it was like over tourism. So Barcelona, Copenhagen did it very well, and Gothenburg, and then cities like Glasgow started to do things, and they were using it very much as a competitive advantage and as an area where it's something that they were doing really well. So it was always one of those things that we thought we'll get to that, or we did bits and pieces of it, but our main objective was growth. And I suppose then COVID happened. And I think whenever something stops and hammer blow to the economy and the jobs in the tourism industry that we knew and know and love, we started questioning everything. And suddenly tourism was seen as a bad thing. You know, suddenly actually there's a whole issue around the climate emergency or the climate disaster, and maybe tourism had been growing too fast, too quick. And everyone started questioning that. Then even whenever there was the reopening, there were, you know, Ireland and certainly in the south, there was issues around local citizens querying, do we actually want visitors here? Do we want cruise ships here? Are they welcome? Is that really what we want right now? And suddenly we had a bit of a concern in terms of a lot of soul searching, to be honest, to go, well, surely tourism's great because it's created jobs, it's created prosperity, it's, you know, given us a better city to work, live, invest and study. But suddenly now tourism was seen as a bad thing. And then we started to realise actually we need to step up to the plate here. Belfast City Council has got a very ambitious resilience strategy we need to get behind, very ambitious targets there around emissions and the 2030 plan. But how do we square the circle? Because actually we still need to grow. And all of our research tells us that we still haven't really got the dividend from tourism that we deserve and that many of the communities deserve. So there's still more headroom there for growth. And then we started to worry, are we too late? So if we start now tackling sustainability, will that look a bit fake? Will it look a bit not genuine? And we're jumping on the bandwagon and all of this talk about greenwashing, and you're nearly better doing nothing than doing that because it's not genuine. And then we sort of came full circle on it to actually realize, you know what, this time that we are closed, this time that that we aren't running a million miles an hour is really the time to think about genuinely that building back better piece. And it gives us time to think about, well, some of this stuff isn't actually very difficult. We just need to do it, and it's going to be a journey, and we just need to start that work. And also then a lot of the research that we'd obviously been following in all of our key markets and segments was actually telling us about, you know, in terms of the force for good, that actually if we did the right thing, it also is going to be important for our markets. 95% of all of our event organisers globally say sustainability is critical. This whole issue around purpose and focus and impact, you know, a lot of our event organisers want to go to places where they can make a difference. A lot of events are having to question, and particularly conferences, why are we doing that? Sure, you know, why are we going in person versus a Zoom? And therefore that goes back to the whole purpose issue. On the consumer and leisure side, we're looking at big trends like responsible travel, local food, and people looking to, if they are going to have a major event, they need to know that they need to be mindful of the impact on the community. So sustainability is no longer an area for competitive advantage. It is very much an area of responsibility for destinations. And from our perspective, it was a big message to us that we needed to step up and we really needed to raise our game. So we started, and we started that really led out. We joined the Global Destination Sustainability Movement, and that's the world's largest benchmarking index for cities essentially around the world. And we joined that because where do you start? Where do you start with a very going from doing very, very little in this area to trying to make a difference? And we sat the exam, as I call it, the index, in October, and we sat an exam that we didn't study for essentially, and we were ranked 47th out of 48 cities in that, and we knew that was going to be the case, but what we got out of that was a structure. So by going through the process and the benchmark, and we realized actually we learned a lot in doing the assessment, and we realized what we were doing quite well and actually what we were doing not well at all. And the good news out of that ranking though was that actually some of the really hard things like you know, recycling levels and change, some of the really hard things at a city level were actually performing quite well. And some of the easy things that are easier to fix, we actually performed terribly on, which was around the tourism piece. So we developed a plan. And there's 4 elements to it. And this is very early days, but we're starting a journey towards a sustainable Belfast. And we've developed some actions and KPIs in our business plan. So the first thing is about, well, how do you get towards that journey? And the big thing was, well, we need to start from within. So as Visit Belfast, our commitment is that we're going to become a fully certified sustainable DMO. And that's not about getting the certification. That's about the process of doing things better. So that's about literally looking at our company and saying, how do we become more sustainable from our procurement? How do we look at the social value agenda as well? We're going to establish a company team focused on sustainability and new KPIs. And also Belfast has an ambition perhaps to become a certified destination by 2025. And that obviously would be led out of council and be subject to council approval and commitment. And that is a big task to do. And it's probably only 10% of the destinations that actually achieve that. But I think it's right that we should aim for it. And we're going to establish a tourism task force under the Resilience Board. And the other bit is around our industry. How do we get our industry on that journey with us? And one of the challenges there is resources and cash in the tourism and hospitality industry right now, obviously are going to be a challenge. So we're working with Belfast City Council to look at a whole process around to incentivise certification and to bring the industry on that journey with us. And our very ambitious target is to have 50% of our industry, whenever we do build back better, 50% of our industry will be certified sustainable businesses. And the reason for that is that's a commitment. That's a commitment from Belfast and a commitment from many of our partners to do the right things and to start shifting that needle around those big ambitious targets around emissions by 2030. And the other two, thanks, Anne. The other two strands of the plan, and the one in orange is where I really need your help, is that we want to identify a sustainable network of organisations and partners doing brilliant things, just like you're doing in EastSide, that we can work on in terms of identifying those initiatives and projects that you're probably already doing that ashamedly I should probably know more about. And then really I'd love to work with you in terms of, well, how do we promote those to inbound event organisers, to tour operators? How do we really work with you in partnership to do that? And the other bit is around this perception of tourism as a force for good. We thought we were doing a great thing by growing tourism, and we just assumed that everyone would be happy about that. But we did all these surveys on our visitors, but we actually never surveyed the residents. That's something we need to change. So very much we're going to be looking at, well, understanding what communities feel about tourism and starting to work on that. And that's probably going to be some hard truths for us in that, but we'll have to start and we'll have to learn. And we've also set targets around 30% of our business events will have a sustainability plan in place, by 2020. And they'll also have an impact plan in place. And Simon talked about Copenhagen. We've got agreement from Copenhagen to roll out the Copenhagen Legacy Lab in Belfast. And that's all about events come and go in cities, but we want them to make a difference here. So what's the 10-year plan after that event comes? And cruise, we're going to do a lot of work there with Belfast Harbour. And if we do all of that, we'll actually improve our ranking and we'll have a better place to work, live, visit and study. So that's the final slide, and I've left my details on there because, as you can see, we have a lot of work to do, and it would be brilliant to work with you as we start that journey. Thank you.
Rachel, thank you for that, and thanks for sharing the plan. And I think there were a lot of people interested in that, and good to know it, good just even to get the information. It's fantastic. I want to move on now to Maeve Monaghan. I'm sure many of you know Maeve. I stalk her on Twitter, but Maeve is Chief Exec of the Now Group, and really that's an award-winning social enterprise that supports people with barriers to employment. So Maeve, delighted that you're with us this evening, and over to you. Are you muted, Maeve?
Sorry, just wanted to check there. I was having a bit of a problem sharing my screen. Can you see it okay there? Yeah, so just let me see it. There's a bit of a, yeah, there.
Yeah, we
so
can.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Really, really good segue, I think, from the previous speakers. And as somebody who spent a bit of time in Bilbao with Brendan, I can attest to that brilliant bridge and the great wine there as well. But I think I was really keen on linking into this session today because I loved the title, and the idea of making money really interests me. So I would say I'm a social entrepreneur living in Belfast and working in Belfast, but I just love making money. It's just what we do with it is different. And it's taken me a long time to have the confidence to say that, because a lot of the times if you're a social entrepreneur, it's kind of making money is thought of as a bad word. And I've certainly never felt that way. That idea of making as much money as possible and helping deliver for participants is something that gets me up every morning, even if it's only to go to my living room. So if you look at our strategy plan for Now Group, we support over 1,000 people with learning difficulties and autism into paid jobs of the future. And we were born in West Belfast, but we operate right across Northern Ireland now. And we've actually just extended some of our work into the south of Ireland as well. But you know, our strategic priorities are laid out there, but I wanted to talk particularly about the piece on the second line on our priorities around growth and sustainability. And I think that's really, really important to us as an organization. So we want to do more, we want to support more people, and we want to make more money because it drives that mission. The more successful Now Group is, the more people with disabilities I can get into paid jobs. And that works really, really well overall as a society. It just, to me, seems like a no-brainer. And you know, touching on what Simon said, and certainly echoing what Brendan said, this is not either or in relation to success for the city. We work really, really well with the private sector and businesses, and we collaborate quite a lot with them, and we're all going to be needed if we're going to get through this. And for Belfast to be really, really vibrant, I think we have to understand that it's not, well, there's always a bit of competition. I like a bit of competition too, but it's not a them versus us in relation to the third sector or garden business. It doesn't work unless we're all part of a social economy. So if you look at the Now Group family, I always say the Now Group itself is like the home place. That's a family. That's where all of our services are delivered for our participants. We have a family service, we have an employment and training program. We'll deliver any of the work, because the people we work with range from people who are, and I was just laughing when smiling when I saw John on here today. We have some GPs on our books and university lecturers, Brendan, and we go right through to people with very, very complex disabilities and everybody in between. And it's that idea of people that's so important to us, and those people who, for different reasons, due to the nature of their learning difficulty or autism, have challenges accessing mainstream services and jobs. And if you think of that home place, we have a number of family members, and Love Catering would probably be one of the ones that people know best. Anybody who's been in the Bobbin before lockdown will know that that's one of our sites, but it's grown into quite, you know, a successful business, catering business. We have 6 sites, turnover before lockdown of about 1.3 million, with plans to move that to over 2. We're the brakes slammed on with COVID, certainly, and we're looking at a recovery plan around that. But that's to give you an indication of the commerciality of social enterprises if we're given the right conditions and support to let us get on with making money. And I'll tell you a little bit more in a minute about the reason why that type of business works well. But very basically, for when we're operating those businesses, we've got the Bobbin Cafe in City Hall. We have our own cafe I'm going to show you in a moment in the Grosvenor Road, with the 3 the museum sites, Cultraw and Ulster Museum, and the one in Oma, and our little pottery in Crawfordsburn. All of those provide about 100 training places a year for people to get the work, the training they need to move them into paid jobs. And our focus is on paid jobs. And that initiative about bringing people along, moving them forward, and I'll show you some of the outcomes. I'll mention quickly the pottery business, because that's a really good idea of pivot, and that's everybody's favorite word at the minute. But when you've got 6 cafes and 5 of them closed, you have to think of what else you can sell. And we always had a little pottery in Crawfordsburn that sold mugs in our cafes, but we had to flip that online and start scaling that business. And that has seen an increase, 300% increase in sales online across the UK and Ireland, with a potential, really good opportunity and support from Invest NI to grow that. But that's that idea of having a really good quality. And I've got one. It's not a prop. I was drinking my tea out of it, but a really good quality product that's developed and you know, made by our potters and people with learning difficulties, that people want. They want a product with purpose. So, you know, the buying power now, people want something that makes a difference. And we have that product. It's not the cheapest mug. It certainly isn't the cheapest mug at £18 each, but, you know, we're selling them all over because people like the idea of being buying into the brand. And then we have our Jam Card initiative, which I think, you know, JAM stands for just a minute, please be patient, I have a learning difficulty, autism, dementia, brain injury, a condition, whatever, used by over nearly 80,000 people have JAM cards across the UK now. And we deliver on, designed by our participants, but that's a model where businesses pay to become JAM card friendly, and then people get their cards for free. And I see a really big opportunity for towns and cities to look at how their new accessibility piece, how they make sure that people with disabilities and their families are welcome. Engage, which is a social enterprise, a community interest company that sits outside the, you know, part of Now Group, but it trades as an, you know, it's a valuation business, and it provides measure social impact. I saw somebody mention earlier about that, and provides reports and evaluations on that, and the profits for that go back into the charity. So when you're starting to think, or when we're, you know, anybody that's new to the idea of social enterprise, the entrepreneurship is there, the businesses are there, and the scalability is there. I think, as Brendan says, we need the structural support, and then we need people to get out of our way and let us get on with it. Because I think social enterprises and businesses work really, really well together. As I mentioned, you know, the fact that this is in East Belfast was really interesting to me, because that people, purpose and place is really important. And, you know, Rachel had mentioned that about, you know, place and purpose, and it's definitely a focus for us. And here's some of our people here, unbelievable. You know, I just miss them so much working from home. But, you know, you're dealing with people who are very, very often just completely disregarded. And as everybody has said in the previous speeches, it wouldn't matter how successful Belfast is. You could have every single shiny building and every tourist attraction going, but if the people who live in the city don't feel welcome and don't feel connected, we are not doing our job. It would be an absolute disgrace. So the money does have to touch the side, and the people need to feel welcome. And everything that we do is designed with our participants leading on it. So it's their ideas. The reason why Jam Card works is it surely wasn't my idea, because I didn't even know it was a problem. It was their idea, and we helped design it. But we then wrap around the commerciality model, and we look at really, really good brand and design. Yes.
Time nearly.
Yes, sorry. I just wanted to just flip on to some of our sites. When you look at the idea of what social enterprise can do in a place, this is our site on the Grosvenor Road across from the Royal Hospital. This is what it looked like before, and this is what it looks like now. So that idea of regeneration buildings, making them really, really cool, making them feel gorgeous, and then encouraging people to come in. And, you know, lots of people told me at the time, you know, you're going to have to barricade that, they'll steal everything out of it, they'll burn that, you'll never, that building is successful, really, really working successfully, because it's accepted by the community and really, really works. 5 years old now, sustains itself, and our areas need it. So I just, in finishing it, I suppose there's just that feeling that I would have when you're starting to look at all areas of Belfast, that they should be inclusive. If you're going to be looking at customer bases, it's not just your tourists from outside, it's also the populations of people that are living here already and their families, and the fact that they have massive spending power and need to be engaged at all parts of looking at the design. So that's really where I finish. I've left some details if anybody wants any more information about Now Group, or happy to take questions later about social enterprise.
Excellent. I think we'd want to share all the slides. Maybe if you wanted to stop your screen share.
Oh yeah, sorry. But
you know, again, I think all our speakers tonight could have talked for 3 times the length of time, and we'd all still be interested in listening to them. But want to finish off now with Sammy Douglas. Sammy, who I met in the early 1990s when he was Mr. Community Business in East Belfast. But Sammy, as many of you know, would have worked with the International Fund for Ireland and has been very involved in bringing money, resources and investment to East Belfast. So Sammy, really interested in your perspective on money in East over the last 30 years.
Okay, Anne, can you hear me?
Yep.
Maybe if I could put up my screen, share my screen here. This is a printout from, I looked up Amazon.
Sammy, I was panicking there going, right, I need to co-host him.
It's Making Good Money in Belfast, paperback, authors Maurice Kincaid and Sammy Douglas. And they're selling it for 56 quid for a second-hand copy. I have about 500 in my office, anybody wants one for 50 quid. But seriously, I want to just talk about my own experience over a number of years, primarily in disadvantaged areas. And I suppose I go back to 1979. Let me tell you a very, very quick story. I was involved in the Beresford Workers Cooperative in the Shankill Road with Jackie Redpath, who was my mentor. And Jackie sent me to Derry, London Derry, for a seminar, 1979. And if you remember, the troubles were raging. And the late Paddy Docherty was there at McGee College, and there was no overhead presentations or no computers in those days, but he had a blackboard. And he asked the question on the blackboard, wrote this question up. First of all, he said, how many Catholics are here? And about 29 people put their hands up. And then he said, how many prods are here? So as I was running out the back door, I'm only joking, but as I put my hand up sheepishly, and he wrote up on the blackboard, where are the prods? And what he was saying was, right, it really challenged me and set me on a journey. He was saying, why is it, community enterprise and cooperatives and credit unions and youth centres are built by the Catholic Church? Why are all those things in Catholic areas? Because we've as much disadvantage in East Belfast and the Shankill and Sandy Road, and really set me on, I suppose, a journey in one sense. So for me, in East Belfast, fast forward to 1990s, which in terms of community development was a fairly barren area in terms of the number of community groups, quite a low number of community groups, quite a number of what I would call private community work. Churches were very much involved. And I got involved, as Anne said, in community business. And I worked with a person that most people know, Maurice Kincaid. And all I could say is that Maurice was a whirlwind in many ways. Man of great ideas. And so I worked with him over the years. And a couple of observations I've observed over this past number of years in terms of the most successful people who are involved in social enterprise, community enterprise, or whatever. And the first thing is the key to having leaders, people who are passionate, have the drive, the motivation, the vision for their communities. And I suppose I look at an analogy, and I see Jonathan McAlpin here. Alex Ferguson is a good example of someone who's a leader, made many mistakes, went through all the difficult times, up and down, but he persevered to be one of the best leaders in soccer for many, many years. Over the years, in terms of community development, that has changed. And I would certainly argue that some of the most successful community enterprises, social enterprises, are in East Belfast. In fact, right across the United Kingdom with some excellent. And let me just highlight a couple of projects and the importance of leadership. One of those projects would be East Belfast Network Centre, which I've been involved in with Michael Briggs. And looking at that project, it's sustainable. It's the old Temple Avenue School. It's, to my knowledge, it's fully occupied. It's been involved in community development, but also housing very many voluntary and community organisations. And even during the pandemic, we've held through. But again, that goes back to leadership. Someone like Michael, I don't know if Michael's here or not, but having the vision and the commitment. I remember sitting on a Friday afternoon with Michael when the Temple Avenue School was derelict, the roof was falling in. We met a guy and who key influencer. Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock, we went home feeling nothing's going to happen here. And within a couple of weeks, he came back and he helped us so much to make up one of the most successful projects in East Belfast. And I could talk about more and more projects in terms of enterprise parks, creches, whatever, in terms of local communities. So I don't have the time to do that, but I'm just going to mention another couple in terms of where we're at in East Belfast. If I look at the Connswater Community Greenway, again, if you think of leadership, that wouldn't have happened without Wendy Langham. I know Michelle's doing a great job. She's doing a different job, perhaps very much a development job. But Wendy was involved in that project, and I think she lost out with her children, not seeing her children, because she's so passionate, so committed to it, and becoming one of the best projects, certainly in the United Kingdom. And when I think of projects, another observation that I would look at is that the importance of sustainability. I remember talking to Marsh and Kate all those years ago about East Belfast Partnership as it was then. And one of the things we talked about was, these grants are going to run out. No longer will we be able to get the funds that we've been getting up to date. And we decided to go down that route of community enterprise. But I also say as well, look at those projects, look at East Belfast Partnership, look at the Network Centre and others. People run it as if it was their own business, totally committed. When I see, I've been following Maeve Monaghan over the years, and to see the drive that she's been involved in that. But Maeve runs that project as if her life depended on it. Probably does anyway, Maeve. Anyway, so in terms of the green aspects of it, the green benefits, let me just finish off by talking a bit about Connswater Community Greenway. Again, when I look at the positive aspects, a social enterprise can bring so many benefits, not just in terms of, I remember John Kyle talking about the health benefits about cycling, about walking along the Greenway. But one of the things we did was, along with one of the departments, was that the flood alleviation scheme. I remember when people's houses in Orangefield, 7 o'clock in the morning, and the houses were flooded 2 to 3 feet high. Some of those people actually left their houses, never to go back again. Once we rerouted the river, we're well used to rerouting East Belfast. Once we did that, those house prices went up. People were able to get insurance, maybe for the first time in their lives. Another very quick example, and I'll finish off these couple of examples, is that a friend of mine and his daughter bought a house down at the Connswater Community Greenway. The reason why she bought it, she wanted to be close to the Greenway. It's not tremendous that you're actually bringing people into the area, people who want to live. So it's not just about all the mental aspects of mental health aspects, cycling, whatever. But if you look at the C.S. Lewis Square, how that has developed over the years has been tremendous in terms of having the coffee shop. When I was there today, had to stand in the queue before I got my coffee. We're also looking at developing a hotel there. Now, I know there've been a few difficulties with that, but it's been in the pipeline. I think from what I know, we've got planning permission, and we're also looking at a cycling club. So that's about 7 or 8 minutes of 39 years of community enterprise in East Belfast. And as one of my favourite people in the world used to say, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Sammy, hold on to those books. I would dust them off and start flogging them down the visitor centre, because I'd say there's some truth said that still be relevant. Can I thank, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm overstimulated now, and I would just love to stay on and chat, but I know we're committed to an hour. We've only got about 3 minutes really for questions, so if we could have a couple of quick questions. And there's one there I noticed from Johnny to Maeve. Just to read the question out, Johnny, I'll just go straight to Maeve for a response on this. But you said East Belfast, broadly speaking, does not generate the same volume of big heading social enterprise projects compared to other corners of the city. Why do you think that is, and does it matter? For example, the social economy hub model didn't work that well. Maybe a quick response to Johnny's question, please.
Well, I would kind of beg to differ on the place-based piece, because I think there's quite a number of social enterprise buildings that have been very successful in East Belfast. But I think one of the things, I suppose it's the same challenge right across the city. It's about if you sit waiting on funding coming before you're allowed to do it, you wait a long time. And I think there's something there about just trying to think big and trying to think about something that nobody else is doing. That's important. It helped us that we weren't one area based. I think, in fairness, it was the biggest issue for me because I could never get area-based funding, but it left us with a little bit more flexibility. But I do think the sector has to be really, really big and not be afraid to talk about big numbers and turnover. I don't mind doing that because I know the more we make, the more people we can support. But that's an ambition piece about sending a very brave strategic plan.
Thanks for that, Maeve. And I think what I'd said to all our speakers at the start of this evening was that I wanted them to have the last word, because they hadn't heard what each other had to say, and they can read the questions there and we record the questions. But maybe just a last line from each of you on what you've heard. What would your message be to East Belfast, to the partnership, to the Greenway, based on what you've talked about tonight, just a parting shot? And then I want to finish off with Michelle, who's the manager of EastSide Greenways, and just maybe explain what the next steps are for us with these webinars. So if we go Simon, then Brendan, then Rachel, Maeve, and Sammy, then Michelle.
Thank you, Anne. I love listening to Sammy there. You know, it's sort of back to I was going to say good old days, Sammy, but they weren't always good old days. But I miss Sammy and I used to sit beside each other every Monday morning in a sort of white building in East Belfast, and sometimes what was being discussed in the room was, well, not sometimes, always what was discussed in the room was a lot less interesting than what Sammy had to tell me about what he had been doing that past weekend. I think that, you know, look, I think that I would like to say that I think that there is, as a sort of a bit of an outsider, I have to say, of the city, but now privileged to work in the city and work with businesses in right across Belfast, I think there's a heck of a lot of really, really good stuff going on in and around the east of the city, and we're really pleased that our membership has started to grow in that part of the city, and that's because there's a real cluster of activity. And I think East Belfast, and particularly where EastSide Partnership is based around at C.S. Lewis Square there, and what's happening at Portview, and what Johnny and the team are doing at the other end of the road, you know, there's a lot of really, really good stuff happening. How we can, and I think what I would be keen to work with you guys with is around that connectivity. You know, how can we make sure that East Belfast is not seen as, you know, the city centre is not seen as a place apart, isn't connected to the east of the city, and that it is one city. And I know that's a huge challenge in Belfast, given our history and given our geography and the fact there's a river and there's lots of big roads dividing communities as well. But that is, I think, the secret to success in the long term. It's not just having a centre and then 4 parts of the city, but trying to merge it and connect it whilst retaining that sort of distinct identity that each part has. And I really look forward to working with people in East Belfast and EastSide Partnership in particular to try to make that happen over coming years.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, you're in a meeting.
Thanks, Simon. Somebody's not on mute. Brendan, you're next. And one of the words you used in yours was teampreneurs. And I really like that. And I see Moya saying there need to be new models as well that need support from funders, etc., if they don't come in the usual package. So, but last word from you, Brendan, on what you've heard.
And really to pick up on a really good question about demonstrating impact, we need to be much more convincing about showing properly what the impact of these social enterprises are, different from mainstream businesses or what the public sector can offer, and we're often not very good at that. May have mentioned Gage, which does an excellent job in social return on investment. I'm obliged to say that because me was on, but I actually used them recently in a project, and it really was saying, this is why these things are different. This is what you're buying from them. I think at times we tend to inflate the impact of the social or community and voluntary sector without really evidencing it. And maybe that I mean, there's some credit to the council that they engaged the CLES, the Centre for Economic Studies, in a really interesting project about local multiplier effects and how the social enterprises in disadvantaged area creates and recycles and retains money, cash, supply, and salaries much more efficiently than any other form of business, including in the East. One thing, slightly surprised at the point about East Belfast, and maybe there is an issue here about evidence and how it's used and how it's demonstrated, because there's some excellent models. I mean, Airbnb is becoming a real problem in the city centre, hundreds of them in the city centre, and you do need regulated like they have done in other countries. But EastSide said, we just go and build our own. You know, we'll sit and complaining about it is one thing, but actually getting your own Airbnb, extracting that value, keeping and recycling the profits from it, which aren't inconsiderable. That's maybe a story. Maybe those stories need to be better narrated in terms of the experiences of social economy in East Belfast than they are at the moment. I certainly don't see it as a weakness.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Thanks for that, Brendan. Rachel, then Maeve, then Sammy, and then Michelle.
Great, thanks everyone. So I'm looking at my notes actually while the session was going on and scribbling frantically, and a couple of words jumped out: impact, people, community, and leadership. And the whole thing about people and change, and Maeve, the bit about working with your participants to come up with ideas. And I think that's really inspired me then back to the point about leadership from what Sammy was saying about working with community leaders to make change. And I think I'm really excited. I can see Chris obviously is a member of our board, Michelle, I sit in the board of the resilience group, and Maeve, I'm definitely going to continue to stalk you on Twitter to learn more.
You just give me a call. Nobody has to stalk me on Twitter.
And the bit about impact then is really, really exciting as well. And Brendan, I'd love to pick your brains about that, because one of the things, we still have a job to do in terms of growing and supporting tourism and hospitality. That industry is on its knees and needs support. So we have to do that. But actually, we have to do all of the other stuff that we haven't maybe been doing as well as we could have. And that's all the community impact piece. But then how do you measure that? And so people have done that before and they do it really well. So I think there's a big job of work there. And I think because again, I think we have to be very accountable in terms of the work that we do and where that's going and the impact we're making. So I think there's a lot to learn, and I'm really delighted that I have locked my kids away for the evening to join this session and learn more and meet you all. So thank you.
Thank you. Last word, Maeve.
There's probably 2 points I would make. One, I suppose, is we need to stop trying to just replicate everything that everybody else is doing. I just think there's a really, really good opportunity for us to look at supply chains and who needs what are people buying, and how can we sell it to them. So my example of that is everybody wants a Love Cafe now, and that's not being unfair. That but the reason I'm saying, stop trying to do stop trying to do social enterprise cafes, particularly because lots of them, 95% of them, don't work. Look at buying or making something and selling it to me, or selling it to business, or selling it to the public. Look at what people are buying anyway, and look at like any other business. There's that part of it, and I suppose the part about being bold with your brand and your marketing. Every other business does it. Us as a sector tend to undersell ourselves. That might lead to Brendan's last point about not promoting ourselves first. So there was quite a bit of a soul searching that we had to say to talk about our turnover and talk about our commerciality and push our brand out there. But people want it. It is there is a massive market there for tourism and local people who want to know that their money's making a difference, and we need to put it right in front of them and be proud that we have a really, really good product and sell it really well to them.
Thank you. Sammy? You're muted, Sammy.
I'm just come back to Simon's point about we used to sit together on a Monday morning, and he obviously hasn't twigged that he was the Minister for Finance at the time, and he was responsible for billions of pounds, Simon. So I must confess that's one of the reasons why he's a sympathizer.
I thought it was my witty stories. I mean, it's all right, my good humour, but
yeah, I suppose when I look at all the projects, and I think this has been really good as a regards networking project, because certainly any of the projects I was involved in over the years, and I see people here at the moment, networking was a key. We couldn't have done half the stuff recorded without Belfast City Council, the Northern Ireland Executive, the IFI, the whole range of people, and with councillors, people like John, but also with politicians as well. So networking is a key for any success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for listening 6 minutes beyond 1:30, but it was worth every minute. So thank you for that. Michelle, what's happening after tonight? This was our last one and we're debating, will we keep going? We've raised awareness. What do you think?
Yes, I'm just going to finish with a few closing remarks and next steps. I suppose our initial plan, I think, was just to have 3, but we, I suppose, give this a bit of a pilot and a test to see how they would work out, and other themes have evolved from them. And I suppose what Sammy has said there, I think the real learning and outcome from this has been that networking piece and connecting people. And actually, there's been a lot of work have come out of the webinar series, not necessarily that we have been involved in, but certainly other people have connected, which we're really good to see. And for us, it's always around, you know, developing and enhancing East Belfast as much as we can. So we do plan to have our final webinar next month. EastSide Partnership will be celebrating 25 years. So we do plan to have a webinar around regeneration and I suppose what impact that has in local communities and in terms of sustainability. We are working with Queen's University, including Brendan and Ruth Hunters here this evening too, and we're putting together a bit of a report coming out of the webinar series, which will hopefully inform an action plan. As Ruth or as Anne explained at the start, you know, Connswater Committee Greenway completed in 2017, and we want to make sure that it's sustainable and then it works and it delivers against all those initial aims and outcomes that we set out to achieve. So we're very excited about what the future can hold, but we want to ensure that there is further development across Eastside and also how that connects into citywide development too. So hopefully you'll come along to our next one as well.
Absolutely. So listen, good night, everybody. It's Thursday. I always say it's the best night of the week. Everything's in front of us, the weekend and everything. So enjoy the Friday feeling. And remember, you wouldn't have it if you didn't have a Monday morning. So good night and safe home. Enjoy. Well, you are at home, so enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.